The mist clung to the undergrowth like a dying breath. Dr. Zhu turned back, his old eyes settling on the boy. His manner carried a gentle poise, utterly devoid of the arrogance such power often breeds. Kael, in turn, saw no reason to answer with cold hostility. The words came steady and unadorned. It was not a matter of unwillingness. That fruit, I truly ate it. A screech tore through the clearing.
Boy!
Vic's voice slashed the air, so sharp it threatened to shred the morning mist itself. Dr. Zhu shot him a single displeased glance and gave a slow shake of his head. Since the young friend is unwilling, this old man will not press the matter. Vic, let us go. Vic's glare crawled over Kael, venomous and reluctant. Boy, pray we never cross paths again. Kael's face remained a mask of ice.
A threat?
Fear never flickered. From Vic's tone, from the arrogance carved into his form of address, Kael had already guessed the man's identity. And yet he felt almost nothing for the great Kai royal house. Since childhood, Thuron had instilled in him one unshakable principle. A true man stands between heaven and earth. He offers respect, but he bows to no one. A frail, soft voice rose from behind him. Young Master Folly staggered out from the shadows, heavy-eyed with sleep. Her mortal frame had reached its limit. 2 days, 2 nights, no food, no water. She could hold out no longer. Folly, you're awake. Kael's words sharpened with worry. Don't move, your foot is still injured. Young master, I'm so hungry.
Little friend.
Dr. Zhu had returned. Kael's heart seized. In a single motion, he swept Folly behind him, a shield of flesh and bone. The fruit really was eaten by me.
That is not the matter.
Dr. Zhu smiled, a quiet curve of reassurance. From his storage ring, he retrieved an exquisite jade bottle. Its surface gleamed with a deep, liquid luster. I see this little girl is gravely wounded. This is a medicinal powder I mixed in my idle hours. I give it to you, young friend. Kael exhaled a breath he did not realize he had been holding and accepted the bottle. In the distance, Vic's face darkened to a thundercloud. He looked ready to explode, yet did not dare. This Dr. Zhu truly had the patience of a saint. What an unbearable bargain for this brat. Thank you, grandfather. Folly peeked out from behind Kael, her weak voice barely a whisper. A flicker of dazed emotion crossed Dr. Zhu's face, and something soft and deep kindled in his eyes. Little girl, you do know your courtesies. This old man's medicine will not go to waste.
He stopped.
His brows furrowed.
Something is off.
Senior, what is it? Kael's heart lurched again, a cold fist closing around it. Dr. Zhu studied Folly with a blade, sharp focus, and pondered for a long, suspended moment. Child, come here. Let this old man take a look. Folly glanced back at Kael, timid as a startled fawn. Only after his nod did she step forward. Dr. Zhu's large, weathered hand settled gently over her forehead. A faint, milky, white glow seeped from his palm. It curled around his fingertips like drifting fireflies, luminous and weightless, and soundlessly sank into Folly's brow. The very air seemed to freeze for half a breath. That radiance was no common thing. Every wisp carried an exceedingly pure force of spiritual consciousness, and wherever it passed, even Kael's spiritual senses trembled, a minute and subtle shudder, as if some ants sealed deep within the fabric of existence, had been gently stirred. After a long moment, the glow slowed. Faded. Dr. Zhu withdrew his hand. The look he turned upon Folly was tinged with a deep and quiet heartache. If these old eyes do not deceive me, this girl suffers from what the ancient texts call Soul-Deficiency Syndrome. Soul-Deficiency Syndrome.
What is that?
The soul is the root of a person. Be they cultivator or mortal, the soul is locked tight within the spirit platform, without the slightest leakage. But one whose soul is incomplete wanders in a daze, dull and slow, and in severe cases may even appear imbecilic.
Cold.
The words fell upon Kael's heart like shards of a frozen lake.
It matched. It all matched.
From the very moment he had found Folly 10 years ago, so small and broken in the wreckage, her mind had never been entirely lucid. He spoke of this, and Dr. Zhu's frown cut deeper. According to the records, those afflicted with Soul-Deficiency Syndrome suffer a constant loss of soul force and cannot live beyond 3 years. Yet this child beside them, Folly watched weakly, grasping only fragments of the words that decided her fate.
Senior,
Kael's urgency split the air. This Soul-Deficiency Syndrome, can you cure it? This old man's art is shallow. Kael's eyes dimmed. His heart plummeted into a cold and lightless abyss.
However,
Dr. Zoo's tone shifted, a single spark in the dark. This old man's honored teacher, known as Ghost Doctor, stands peerless in the arts of medicine and alchemy. Though people flatter me with the title of divine physician, what I have learned cannot compare to even a sliver of my teacher's skill. If his venerable self were here, there might yet be a way.
Where is he?
Speaking of which, a bitter smile crossed Dr. Zoo's lips. It has been decades since I last heard any word of his venerable self.
Decades?
The word was a frozen blade in Kael's chest. He could wait. He could wait an eternity. But could Folly afford to, young master? Is Folly going to die? Folly is not afraid to die, but Folly cannot bear to leave young master. Rest easy. A sharp, lancing pain shot through Kael's heart. He pulled her into a tight embrace, as if he could shield her from the very hand of fate itself. I will not let you die. I will find a way to save you. This is my vow to you.
Ah, Dr. Zoo sighed, deep and heavy.
Such a delicate spirit touched girl. What a pity. He hesitated for a moment. Then, from the depths of his storage ring, he produced another small bottle. Pure gold in color. Its body was engraved with patterns of exquisite, spiraling complexity, far more precious than the jade bottle from before. This is a Soulmend Pill, left to me by my honored teacher when he departed. It was originally meant to aid my break through to the transcendent realm, but I encountered other fortune and never used it. Pills refined by his venerable self possess effects far beyond the ordinary. His voice became quiet, a solemn offering. Now I give it to you. It can at least offer some temporary benefit. Elder Zoo. Vic was frantic, practically dancing in place. That is a pill personally refined by the Ghost Doctor. You what? Does this old man need your permission to give away his own possessions? Dr. Zoo's face darkened. A man so amiable by nature, to speak such words, his anger must be a rare and weighty thing. Vic hastily forced a flattering smile, yet inwardly he fumed with seething confusion. How had this old soft heart become so generous today? Even the seventh prince had never received such treatment. Senior, your great kindness, this junior will engrave it in memory forever. Kael bowed deeply, folding his body into a full and complete salute. At this moment, his heart, long frozen by the Gu family's poisoned betrayal, felt an unexpected and fragile thread of warmth. Thank you, grandfather. Grandfather is truly a great good man. Folly imitated him clumsily, a small and earnest shadow of gratitude. Dr. Zoo let out a hearty, rolling laugh. Good, good, good. This old man's pill has found worthy hands. Kael reverently accepted the small bottle and gently, carefully opened it. The instant the stopper left the mouth, an impossibly soft and soul-soothing fragrance wafted forth. Unlike the overbearing, fiery intensity of the ember heart fruit, this pill's aroma rose like crushed moonlight, slipping lightly into the nostrils and then surging straight toward the spirit platform. Kael felt a resonant hum shudder through his mind. See. In that single breath, every whisper of wind, every rolling grain of sand within a radius of dozens of yards became crisp and discernible. Just one breath of this fragrance had sharpened his spiritual perception by a visible and undeniable margin. At the bottom of the bottle lay 3 thumb-sized, golden, yellow pills resting in a profound and perfect stillness. It smells so good Folly could almost drool. Here, eat one first. The pill entered her mouth. It dissolved into a warm, gentle stream that slid like liquid silk down her throat. Folly's eyelids grew heavy at once. Her body tilted, and she collapsed softly into Kael's waiting arms. The medicinal power spread like a spring tide, seeping silently into her limbs and bones. Even her cold fingers flushed with a faint trace of color under its warm and healing current. The slumber that claimed her was exquisitely gentle, as if invisible hands had cradled her into the deepest and most peaceful of dreams. Senior, it is nothing. She has no cultivation to anchor her. Absorbing this pill's power will naturally take time. Dr. Zoo cast a final, lingering glance at Folly, a quiet sigh passing through his heart. What follows now is in the hands of your own destiny. Done. Dr. Zoo flicked his sleeve, the pill now secure in another's fate. No lingering regret marked his brow as he turned, poised to ride the wind and depart. The nightingale whipped his robes with a sharp, commanding crack. Loose stones at the cliff's edge skittered over the brink and plummeted into the abyss.
Their hollow echoes were swallowed, whole and entire, by the hungry dark.
This old master shall senior. Kael's voice sliced through the farewell. Its short, sharp reverberation bounced off the cliff walls, a challenge to the departing wind. Dr. Zoo's steps halted. He tilted his head, his gaze narrowing beneath those grizzled and ancient brows. "There's no need. I gifted you that pill solely for the sake of the little girl."
His voice hardened, a wall of dignity.
"If you think I carry favors to extort the Emberheart fruit from you, you insult me."
"You misunderstand, Senior." Kael gently propped Folly against the cool, solid rock face. His hand dipped into his robes.
A flash of searing crimson bled between his fingers.
A small serpent, its entire body like crystallized fire, lay coiled in his grasp.
The scales still shivered faintly, and traces of residual flame aura seeped from their seams, threading the air into a ghostly red mist. It met the faint blue glow of the storage ring on Dr. Zoo's finger without a sound. Red and blue arcing between them like a single taut strand of light. An ember serpent. Vic's eyes bulged, near bursting from their sockets. He scrambled forward, his fine robes bunched in white, knuckled fists, his voice a shrill and grasping thing. No wonder Elder Zoo said these beasts haunt the birthplace of every Emberheart fruit. Boy, why didn't you produce this earlier? Kael did not even flick a glance at Vic. He leveled his gaze, steady and direct, upon the doctor.
"Senior, can you use this?" Dr. Zoo studied the clean mirror, smooth cut at the serpent's nape.
Then he swept a long, considering look at the chipped and notched riven blade still clenched in Kael's grasp. A glint of sharp, knowing light flickered in his eyes.
He gave a small, solemn nod.
"Naturally, I can."
Though the serpent is young, it has already reached the 4th tier. The potency of its beast core surpasses even the Emberheart fruit.
A breath of wind rushed through the clearing, scattering the remnants of red mist into the dawn. The bargain was struck not in words, but in the silent, mutual recognition of debt and honor. And somewhere in the dark of Folly's dreams, the medicine began its slow and silent work. He accepted the ember serpent. His fingertip brushed lightly over the cooling scales, and the lingering fire aura let out a faint, plaintive hiss before snuffing out entirely. Dr. Zoo lifted his eyes to Kael, and his voice took on a weightier edge. "It seems I underestimated you. A stroke of luck," Kael said, his expression unchanged.
Dr. Zoo asked no more.
To slay such a beast at the Meridian opening realm, to have swallowed the Emberheart fruit raw, it was no longer so strange. Every man held his secrets, and his curiosity was never wasted on such things.
Only Vic laughed cold inside, his thoughts a snarl.
Meridian opening?
Slaughter a 4th tier fiend.
He'd probably looted some poor dead fool's prize. A pig sticking scallions up its snout, pretending to be an elephant. Boy, Vic thrust out a hand, his pudgy fingers curling in a beckoning gesture at the ember serpent. "At least you've grasped the principle of repaying kindness." "Hand it over." Kael finally turned to face him, the corner of his mouth lifting faintly. "You want it. What do you think? Trade it for origin crystals. What did you say?" The fat on Vic's cheeks shuddered violently. "This ember serpent goes to the senior." "I'll take nothing in return." Kael's tone was as calm as remarking on the wind. "But you have to pay with origin crystals." The ember serpent was placed firmly into Dr. Zoo's hands. Kael demanded not a single extra origin crystal. To save Folly was to save himself. Kindness repaid tenfold, vengeance the same. Every word Thuron had taught him was branded into his bones. Vic stormed off, his robes fairly smoking with rage. He'd already stomped a dozen paces when his shrill voice slashed back through the air. "Boy, pray we never meet again." The cliff wind tore his words to shreds. Kael's brow didn't even twitch. Amid that same sprawling savage forest, the bounty posted by the Goo family spread like sparks flung into dry tinder. 2,000 origin crystals. A superior grade spirit artifact. Those 8 words blazed in the eyes of rogue cultivators, setting them ablaze. They banded in knots, snatched up their weapons, and plunged into the wilds, tossing aside honest work of herb, gathering in beast slaying. Some cursed Kael on the march patricide, blasphemer against filial duty, a wretch deserving 1,000 cuts. Others calculated how many years of pleasure that spirit artifact could buy them once sold. Still others beat their chests in bitter regret they'd passed him on the mountain path just 2 days ago. That enormous fortune merely brushed shoulders and then gone. Deep in the forest, within a jagged fang, like cave, silence reigned. Folly lay curled on a mat of dry grass. The pinched crease of pain between her brows had smoothed, her breathing long and steady. Kael knelt beside her, his fingertip dipped in the medicinal powder Dr. Zhu had given. With extreme slow care, he dabbed it onto the torn wound on the sole of her foot. The powder met blood with a soft sizzle. The welling blood seemed seized by an unseen force, snapping still, visibly receding, stanching, knitting a translucent film over the gash. A cool sinking force burrowed into the flesh. The wound's edges gently contracted, new granulations wriggling beneath the film, exuding the faintest scent of herbs and sap, the smell of tissue mending. Folly rolled over, her small mouth mumbling in a drowsy blur. Young Master Folly's hungry. Folly wants a chicken leg, a chicken leg. Kael's hand paused. A blizzard from 10 years past seemed to howl back from the depths of memory. In swirling skite, choked snow, a girl of 3 or 4 had huddled by the Gu family's stone steps, her thin garments like a sheet of paper, her tiny face blue with cold, her breathing barely a thread. He'd carried a brazier of coals, offered a chicken leg, and hauled her back through the gates of death by sheer force. After that, she became his personal handmaiden. For 10 years, they'd shared the same bowl of congee, the same blanket, 2 orphans, without father or mother, turning each other into their only kin. Kael drew a deep breath. He sealed the remaining powder with care and tucked it away. His gaze fell upon Folly's pale face, and he spoke each word like hammered iron. I will not let you die. Father is gone. You will not go too, Soul-Deficiency Syndrome. Ghost doctor. Pills? The thoughts streaked through his mind like whetted blades, finally piercing upon a place that might just crack this death, lock open. That man. Perhaps he knew a way. Within the consciousness space, the sword Bastille still hummed. Shade sat cross-legged in midair, his mist, woven face twisted with the vicious irritation of years-long imprisonment. Suddenly, he leaped up and hurled curses at the void. Can't die, can't live. This lord's vengeance, the tirade cut off mid-sentence. He collapsed back down, a surging darkness coiling into itself, and muttered, Fine, so be it. All these years I've endured. Just wait until the brat tries to break through the 10th tier of Kai condensation. What are you mumbling about? The voice came from behind him, flat, cold, carrying the lingering ng resonance of a blade after cleaving wind. Shade's body went rigid. He whirled, his mist-formed features twisting into an unnatural arc. Why are you here again? To see you. With Folly's life at stake, Kael's tone had softened unexpectedly. I have a question. Alarm bells shrieked in Shade's mind, but he schooled his expression into sudden comprehension. He folded his hands behind his back, his voice abruptly lofty. A snag in your cultivation? The mere Kai condensation realm, an ant's stage worth asking about. Listen obediently to this lord, and don't reach beyond your grasp. It's not cultivation. Kael cut him off. Besides, I've already reached meridian opening. Meridian opening, Shade sneered. Just meridian opening, What did you say? He shot up, as if kicked from behind, his misty face warping into an abyss of fury. Who told you to open your meridians? Who permitted this? I told you long ago not to reach beyond your grasp. Did you take my words as wind beside your ears? Before the last word finished, the sword Bastille shuddered. Clang multiple sword, intense woke in the void, simultaneously. Invisible, formless, that razor. Sharp pressure converged from all sides, and the air thrummed with a fine hair, thin metallic whine, as if 1,000 steel needles scraped gently over the eardrums. The oppression wasn't violent, but it hung like a cold sword point, poised 3 inches from the brow, ready to drive home. Shade's fury shattered into panic. He flapped his hands frantically. Wait. That's not what I meant. The 10th tier of Kai condensation, though the simplest of the extreme realms, can forge you a foundation of unparalleled depth. Master it, and your future cultivation will advance with half the effort. How could you abandon it so lightly? Foolish, more than foolish. He slapped his thigh again and again in a show of heartache, his mist-formed features squeezing into an earnest concern so eager it almost touched on fawning. Kael's brow furrowed imperceptibly. Why was this creature so concerned about him today? The 10th tier of Kai condensation is already complete. What? Shade's stare locked on him, the black mist churning in his eye sockets, 2 beams of dark light fixing Kael's face. You achieved it. I did. And did you feel anything peculiar? Shade's voice trembled on a thread so fine it was nearly lost, his mist, fingers clenching unconsciously. My meridians swelled a bit. Nothing else, Kael recalled, his tone offhand. You were right. The extreme realm wasn't hard after all, so that's how it is. This old master misunderstood you.
Good.
Truly good. A spring breeze swept Shade's face, but deep in his eyes, a venomous light flickered like a serpent's tongue before vanishing into the dark swirl. Damn him. This little bastard's life was harder than black iron. A death trap so carefully laid couldn't kill him. How could Shade know of Kael's meridian rebirth? That meticulously woven murder plot hadn't taken Kael's life. Instead, by a twist of fate, it had shoved him onto the platform of the 10th tier. A fire smoldered in Shade's chest, scorching his organs and churning his guts, but he could only crush it down beneath the humming threat of sword intent, chewing his venom and swallowing it whole. Kael's mind hung upon Folly, leaving him no leisure to pick apart the flicker of strangeness across Shade's face. He asked in a low voice, "Have you ever heard of Soul-Deficiency Syndrome?" Within the mind's scape, Shade let out a listless scoff. A damaged soul, essence bleeding away. Why bother asking about that? Kael was silent for a breath. Then, his voice low and measured, he said, "I have a friend." He laid out Folly's symptoms. A sudden escaped Shade, his tone brightening with intrigue. "That little serving maid of yours is no ordinary girl. A mortal body with a fractured soul, without a seal. She wouldn't last 3 years. The fact that she's lived peacefully until now means a true powerhouse used heaven, defying means to bind her spirit. Someone whose cultivation was scarcely beneath my own." Kael's brows knotted. "If the seal held, why the drowsiness?" "It's breaking," Shade drawled. "These past 2 days, she's been tired, yes. That's the sign her soul force is seeping away. How do we fix it? Simple." Shade paused, savoring the moment. "But I have a condition, release me." Kael did not answer. In the next instant, a stark sword, intent coalesced from nowhere and with a wet thump impaled Shade. "You little bastard. You swore you wouldn't strike again. I changed my mind. Will you speak or not?" Seething but ultimately cowed, Shade spat. "Either use soul, nourishing elixir sacred remedies to prolong her life, or wait until I recover my cultivation and reseal her spirit." "There is no other way." Kael remained silent. "Release him? Unthinkable." Sensing Folly beginning to stir in the outer world, he lingered no longer and withdrew from the mind's scape. Inside the cave, Kael opened his eyes and met Folly's bright, glistening gaze. In that instant, it was as if stagnant mud settling at the bottom of dead water had suddenly been pierced by a vein of living spring. Clarity welled up from the depths of her pupils, then brimmed over her eyes. Layer by layer, the vacant dullness peeled away, supplanting itself with a growing, vivid spirit. At last her eyes settled into a pair of limpid autumn pools, catching the cave's faint light and lending her exquisite, beautiful little face an almost devastating grace. "Young master, what are you staring at?" Folly's cheeks went pink. Kael paused, startled. "Folly, have you grown sharper?" She blinked, her features lit by a luster rarely seen before. "Yes," she said, her voice bright. "I feel sharper too. HMPH, from now on, nobody is allowed to call me Folly except young master." Kael's smile was warm. "All right. From now on, if anyone calls you Folly, young master will beat them for you." Her voice softened. "Young master, I just had a dream. I dreamed someone was taking me away, and I'd never see you again. Silly girl. As long as I'm here, no one can take you." She nodded, all obedience. Then a muffled, guttural roar tore through the air. "A demonic beast." Folly's frame tightened, but Kael's face stayed placid. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Stay here and don't move. I'll go take a look." Outside the cave, deep within the dense forest, a handful of scattered cultivators fled for their lives. The ground trembled. Heavy footfalls hammered closer, each one pounding like a drum against their chests. Branches cracked and shattered, leaves flew in swirling gusts, and a wind rank with blood rolled from behind, flattening the underbrush. "Second brother, we can't go further," cried one. "The demonic beasts in that valley ahead are even fiercer." A man in his 30s clenched his jaw. "No time. If it catches us, we're dead. Fight for a chance, and there's still a sliver of hope." A massive shadow, over a dozen feet long, smashed through several small trees and burst from the forest. Silver-striped ironback bear. A hand-width stripe of silver fur running from its brow to its haunches, fangs bared, eyes blazing with brutal bloodlust. As if stripped of all instinct, it ignored the lingering scent of ember serpent, and lunged with gaping jaws at the cultivators cowering a few steps away. In that moment of despair, a thread of cold lightning flickered soundlessly past. No howl of a blade, no whisper of wind. Only a slash of sword, light so fine, so cold it seared, shooting from the shadows into the bear's forehead. A heavy, wet thud. The bear's body split cleanly in two. Organs and blood erupted in a geysering spray, a hot, reeking mist exploding across the dim forest floor like flung crimson ink. The bisected carcass, bones sheared through, crashed heavily to the ground. Before the blood, mist settled, Kael stepped unhurriedly from the gloom. Crouching, he slid 2 fingers into the split, dug once, and a beast cores veined with blood dropped into his palm. The beast cores shimmered with a cold, unnatural silver light in the murky woods. Blood dripped through his fingers. Expressionless, he stowed it in his dimensional pouch, then collected both halves of the bear's corpse. Not once did he glance at the surviving cultivators. The scattered cultivators were only now regaining their senses. A silver, striped ironback bear, a 5th meridian awakening beast, felled in a single sword stroke. The leading man rushed forward 2 steps, clasped his fists, and began, "Many thanks, little brother, for saving our—" Mid-sentence, he took in Kael's face clearly. His voice cut off. The lingering gratitude in his eyes shattered in an instant, replaced by a furtive, burning heat and greed. His throat bobbed slightly, the motion, subtle as it was, sliced across his expression like a blade, carving out a wholly different mien. Kael's brows drew together. Something wrong. The man ducked his head. No, nothing. Many thanks for the rescue, Kael said. No need to thank me. I only wanted its beast cores. He said no more, turned, and walked back into the cave. Having narrowly escaped with their lives and met with Kael's cold indifference, the group had no desire to linger. After putting some distance behind them, the man suddenly grew animated. A female cultivator spat, so full of himself. If Big Brother were here, would he have had his chance? What a waste of a good beast cores. The man shook his head, his voice dropping low. 1 beast cores is nothing. I think that was Kael. The Kael, wanted by the Goo family, gasps. Our misfortunes turned into luck. We're about to make a huge profit. Another fretted, but he can slay a silver, striped ironback bear in 1 strike. His cultivation must be at least 8th meridian awakening. Us few, the strongest among them, a man at 3rd meridian awakening, spoke bitterly. That brat's swordwork is uncanny. We need to fetch Big Brother. Big Brother's an acupoint opening cultivator. Crushing him would be child's play. Hurry. If we're late, someone else will claim the bounty, and all our effort will be for nothing. The figures darted into the dense woods, their words devoid of any shame over the life that had just been saved. Inside the cave, the campfire blazed fiercely. Dried branches cracked and popped, sending sparks dancing, while a bear paw roasted to a glossy golden brown. Fat dripped onto the flames, sizzling softly. The scent of charred meat and rich grease filled the air. Folly clutched a piece of paw meat, larger than her own face, gnawing until her mouth was slick with oil, her eyes brimming with simple, blissful contentment. Kael worked on another piece as well. The blood-flesh essence of a second, order demonic beast, was still reasonably potent. The gains, slight as they were, meant something now, and he would waste not a shred. Folly tossed aside the nod, clean bone, and let out a satisfied belch. Burp so full, Kael wiped the grease from the corner of her mouth and said lightly, "If you're full, we move." The ember serpent's aura here had dissipated completely. The place was no longer safe. Folly nodded obediently. As she climbed onto his back, she suddenly whispered, "Young master, I want to cultivate too. Cultivate. I want to help, young master." Kael smiled. "All right. I'll teach you." In years past, her mind had been too clouded even to sense spiritual energy. Now that the obstruction was gone, it was possible at last. Not long after the two departed, the gang crept to the cave's mouth. The man they'd rescued earlier turned pale. "Boss, he's gone." Scarface stared down at the fire pit. The embers still held their heat. "They can't be far." "After them." "This bounty doesn't slip through our fingers." Outside the wildwood, Vic's restraint finally snapped. "Dr. Zoo, the ghost doctor's pills are priceless treasures." How could you just hand one to a strange little girl? The words asterisk, a criminal waste of heaven's gift asterisk, burned on his tongue. Dr. Zoo shook his head. "In my keeping, it was mere decoration. Letting her endure a while longer is its truest use." "I heard a bounty was posted in the city, someone they want caught," Vic sneered. "A cramped temple stirs up a demon's wind. Skyblade's city always finds trouble to brew. The 7th Prince's matter cannot suffer further delay. We return." Dr. Zoo gazed toward the city and said nothing more. Deep in the dense woods, Kael bounded through the undergrowth with Folly on his back. Sword aura lanced out, cleaving down a pack of second-tier beasts barring the path. Their beast cores were harvested in swift succession. Yet along the whole trek, not a single spirit herb met his eyes. This fringe territory had been scraped clean by countless cultivators long ago. He was weighing whether to push deeper when Folly suddenly gasped, "Young master, something's glowing over there." Kael froze mid-stride. Following her pointing finger, he saw only a hulking ancient tree and a chaos of tangled vines. "Folly, are you seeing things?" Her voice rang with certainty.
No.
Down under the roots. "Ah, it looks just like a fat little doll." Kael drew his longsword, swept aside the thick rot of fallen leaves, and dug where she directed. Folly kept up a stream of guidance. "Deeper." Almost there, almost there. A pit 3 feet deep yawned open. The blade's tip struck something hard, and in that instant a dense fog of spiritual energy, thick as curdled milk, gushed upward. The surrounding leaves shivered as if stroked by unseen hands. Turned earth fell away, and a half-foot umbral ginseng lay bare, its skin pale and tender, its root hairs faintly quivering. The spiritual power pouring off it was so rich that every pore on Kael's body sprang wide. A sharp gleam lit his eyes. This umbral ginseng was leagues beyond the one he'd found at his own breakthrough years ago. "Folly, how did you spot it?" She scratched her head and grinned, sheepish. I was just looking around, in the clear black, and, white of her eyes, a faint, ghostly glimmer flared and died, so fast it might have been a trick of the light. A sliver of doubt flickered through Kael's thoughts, but before he could chase it, Folly bounced on her heels. "Aren't I amazing? Truly amazing. Wonderful." "I can finally help, young master." Kael's smile still lingered. "Silly girl," his spiritual sense screamed a warning. He seized Folly and wrenched her behind him, eyes snapping toward the dark press of trees.
Crack! Crack!
The snap of dead branches drew closer. The air curdled, thickening as though an invisible weight bore down. Scarface strode out of the shadows, slow and deliberate, gray-black baleful aura coiling around his fists. With every step, the leaf fraught underfoot crumbled to silent dust. One by one, the men and women behind him emerged, their greedy stares welding themselves to the umbral ginseng. Kael's fingers clamped around his sword hilt. Veins bulged on the back of his hand, his entire body a drawn bowstring, Folly hidden completely in his shadow. "You," the female cultivator's gaze locked onto his left hand, her voice fraying. "Boss, look what he's holding." Scarface's lips peeled back in a grin, cruelty and delight tangling in his stare. "Umbral ginseng. A fine, fine prize." Who'd have thought we'd snatch a bonus catch? Kael's fingers clenched. The tendrils of the umbral ginseng shivered between his knuckles. He didn't yet know he was a wanted man. He took these ambushers for mere treasure hunters. Scarface's eyes flashed with greed, his words a slavering claim. "That umbral ginseng is mine. The 30. Something thug spat into the withered grass, a scornful grin twisting his lips. "Yours." "You're one breath from the grave, and you still want the umbral ginseng." Fire erupted in Kael's chest, his voice dropping to deadly low. "Yesterday, I saved your lives." The thug folded his arms, contempt etched across his face. "Ha, you drew your blade for those beast cores. It had nothing to do with us." "Stop polishing your own halo." Scarface slashed a hand through the air. Enough killing intent spread across the barren plain. "Circle him." "Don't let those 2,000 origin crystals walk away. 2,000 origin crystals." Kael's pupils contracted to pinpricks. Scarface took a slow step forward, the pressure of his meridia, an opening second stage rolling out like a tide. Malevolent energy coiled around his fists, twisting into pale, black vortexes, the fruit of years of bitter cultivation, a low-grade yellow rank art, the 7 baleful breaths technique. Everywhere the baleful aura touched grass blades, shriveled and curled. He never finished his taunt. A blade flashed tore the air, a shriek that pierced eardrums. "Too fast!" Scarface's pupils shrank to needles, death's chill shooting from his tailbone to the crown of his skull. Pure instinct wrenched his body aside, baleful energy exploding at his waist to throw him clear. The sword's edge raked past his chest, shredding cloth, and a line of blood arced into the air. Behind him, the smirking female cultivator's face froze. Her head slid from her shoulders. A fountain of searing blood erupted from her neck, blooming a crimson flower in the air. The headless corpse swayed twice, then crashed to the ground. Scarface stared at the bone, deep gash across his ribs, his back drenched in cold sweat. If he hadn't been warned yesterday about Kael's hidden trump card, and if his cultivation hadn't been a full realm higher, he'd be the one sprawled in the dirt. Rage and shame twisted his face, veins bulging on his neck as he roared, "All of you, strike. Grab the little girl first." The thug knew better than to face Kael head on. Cold light flickered in his eyes. He spun, fingers hooking into claws, and lunged at the motionless Folly. The fury in Kael's chest detonated. Bloodshot veins crawled across his eyes, his voice a blade of ice. "You seek your own death." Spiritual power flooded the longsword like a burst dam, the blade shuddering with a low dragon's growl. Prime arrival, Sword Kai screamed into existence, tearing a visible white scar across the air. The thug managed only a single wretched cry. He was Meridia, opening third stage. How could he dodge a strike like this? The Sword Kai barreled through his waist, shredding flesh and bone. His torso and legs snapped apart, entrails and splintered bone gushing onto the earth in a wet cascade. The reek of iron and bile punched the sky. Two more hands were already reaching for Folly, barely a foot away. But she stood frozen as if struck dumb, unmoving and deep within those hollow eyes. Twin motes of ghostlight flickered once more, swirling like dark currents in an abyss. In that razor-thin moment, Kael's form blurred before Folly like a specter. The sword point, dense with unreleased Sword Kai, punched through a man's forehead. A brittle crunch echoed as crimson, and white matter erupted from the back of his skull. No pause. The blade pivoted, slashing downward in a cold arc. A second head sword free, severed clean at the neck, blood jetting from the stump like a geyser. "Boy, to hell with you." A thunderclap roar. The scarred man had closed in while Kael was distracted. Both palms, saturated with black, baleful energy, smashed toward Kael's spine. The air itself sizzled and corroded in their wake. Kael spun, eyes dyed crimson, killing intent so thick it was almost solid. Spiritual power rampaged through his meridians, pain stabbing every channel, but he threw everything into a single backhanded slash. Sword edge crashed against baleful aura. Boom! The baleful energy split like torn silk. The sword light carried through, biting deep into the scarred man's arms. Two crisp, overlapping snaps of bone, so clear they set teeth on edge. Scarface's eyes went from vicious to stunned as both his forearms flew away, flipping through the air. Flesh peeled back, white bones stark against the gore. One word escaped him. "You." The blade flashed again. A head rocketed skyward, the face still frozen in shock and bewilderment. Lips parted as though even in death he couldn't grasp how a mere Meridia, an opening boy, could swing such a sword. A handful of breaths. Of the 5 attackers, 4 lay dead, and only the crippled thug still writhed in his pooling blood. "Edgelord? Kill me, please, kill me." Half his body steeped in his own entrails and gore, agony had shattered his mind. Only his cultivation kept a thread of life clinging on. "I beg you." As Kael approached, the thug lifted a blood-smeared hand. "Grant me a clean death." Kael's voice was frost. "Just now." 2,000 origin crystals, what did that mean? It was the goo family, the goo family. The man choked out everything he knew, blood frothing from his lips with every word. A bounty. Kael's mouth curved slowly, but the smile held no warmth, cold as a midwinter blade. "Good the goo family, is it?" he murmured low, the chill in his eyes threatening to spill over. "I hope you're prepared to pay the price." The thug kept gasping his pleas, his voice fading like ash on the wind. Kael didn't spare him another glance. Methodically, he gathered the spoils from the battlefield, then turned back to Folly. "Folly, we're leaving." She didn't move. Like a lifeless doll. Folly, unease stabbed through Kael's heart. "What's wrong?" Instinctively, he looked into her eyes. His body locked. His mind blanked. It was as if 1,000 icy needles had pierced his spiritual altar at once. A bone, deep chill ripping up his spine. In those eyes, 2 glimmers of ghost light rotated slowly, like bottomless abysses. His body, his mind, even his consciousness were being devoured, fragment by fragment. Some invisible force had gripped his soul, dragging him into that swirling vortex behind the ghostlight. Suffocation drowned him. "Ah, Folly," he bit his tongue. The sharp pain clawed back a sliver of awareness. His arm rose, trembling each motion, a battle through viscous mud, until his fingers finally touched her shoulder. "You why?" At his touch, the ghost light in Folly's eyes winked out, as if it had never been. Her gaze fogged over into murky emptiness again. Whatever spark of animation had surfaced now lay extinguished in those depths. "Young master," exhaustion flooded her face, and her body went limp against his chest. "Folly is so tired, damn it." Hearing her address him like that, Kael's gut twisted. Before he could speak, Folly had already slipped into the same heavy slumber as before. The thug's voice was barely a whisper now, like the last wheeze of a punctured bellows. "Kill me, please." A murderous fire reignited in Kael's eyes, his words colder than frozen steel. "If not for you, Folly wouldn't have become like this."
"A quick death."
Impossible. He cast one glacial glance at the broken man, then lifted Folly and vanished into the wilderness in a streak of motion. Moments later, beast howls erupted around the drifting stench of blood. The ground trembled faintly. Several shade forms burst from the tree line and lunged toward the crimson-soaked battlefield. Inside the consciousness space, Shade shot upright at Kael's account, his soul, form so agitated the black mist around him seethed and writhed. His hands scrubbed frantically together, the entire remnant soul trembling as if about to fly apart. "What did you say?" Uncontainable ecstasy quivered in his voice, close to manic.
It's her. The illusion Bainai.
In this backwater, forgotten corner of the world, such a heaven, defying bloodline lies buried. Black mist exploded outward.
Shade threw his head back in mad laughter, and the consciousness space itself shuddered with the sound.
Kael pierced the truth in an instant. Folly's 2 bouts of deep slumber had all stemmed from worrying over his safety. She had inadvertently activated the illusion Bainai, causing her soul force to drain away unnoticed. Shade's sinister whisper coiled through his mind once more.
"Boy, how about this?
I'll take that little girl as my disciple. You can set your mind at ease." No. Kael's refusal was absolute, an unyielding blade with no room for bargaining. "I'll trade you the golden sigil. Don't want it." The link crackled with Shade's frantic desperation. His voice spat through the ether, sharp as a thrown blade. "Don't spit on my generosity. The golden sigil is," he swore it on the great Tao, promised every resource, every treasure, even the reversal of soul, forced dissipation, if only Kael would release him and accept
the girl as disciple.
But Kael's eyes had already turned to winter frost. A razor smile cut across his lips, his voice dipping into a cold deeper than frozen steel. "So your last oath was a lie. You are exactly the scum I thought." "Not a single word of yours can be trusted." Shade tried to speak, but the word choked in the void. Kael spat a final dismissal, a goodbye. He spun and severed the connection with brutal, absolute finality. Distant curses leaked from the severed bond, meaningless as wind over a corpse. In a hidden cave, Kael's eyes opened slowly. His gaze brushed over the girl curled beside him. Folly, her breathing steady and her face still wearing faint traces of exhaustion. She had taken the pills. He turned away and spread out the spoils of battle. Beast cores. Over 300 origin crystals. A bottle of Kai gathering pills, a bottle of blood-boosting pills, both the lowest grade. The scarred man's dimensional pouch yielded the only real surprise, 2 spirit herbs, far inferior to the umbral ginseng, yet an unexpected windfall. Rogue cultivators were dirt, poor, rarely was there any fat to trim. Without so much as blinking, Kael emptied the entire bottle of Kai, gathering pills into his mouth. He grabbed a large handful of origin crystals and drove his cultivation method to full, raging fury. The pills dissolved into a venomous sludge of pill toxins. The crystals shattered, churning with chaotic impurity. Any ordinary cultivator gulping such raw power like a whale swallowing the sea would have had their meridians corroded to ruin in moments. But Kael needed no such caution. Deep within his newly forged meridians, countless minuscule vortexes spun silently like precision grindstones. Impure Kai, pill toxins the moment they brushed against those vortexes, an unseen force tore them apart layer by layer, pulverized them, and expelled them from his body. Only the purest, most concentrated spiritual energy flowed into the depths of his meridians. It dripped like silk threads, gathered, condensed into liquid, and surged through the widening channels. Opening the meridians meant unblocking the 12 primary meridians and 360 branch meridians. The human body mirrored the cycles of the heavens, an innate Tao vessel. That was why all races who walked the path of cultivation ultimately sought to assume human form. The origin crystals on the ground dimmed and crumbled to ash at a visible pace. 89 channels. 90. Then Kael's aura shuddered violently. Expanding spiritual pressure crashed against the cave walls, rattling loose cascades of stone dust. He had stepped into the 3rd realm of meridian opening. His origin crystals, along with the 2 spirit herbs, were drained to nothing. He exhaled a cloud of turbid breath, his gaze falling onto the umbral ginseng. No hesitation. He snatched it up, shoved it into his mouth, and chewed it into a pulpy mess before swallowing. Boom, an explosion of spiritual power, far more violent than before, detonated inside his meridians. The ginseng's medicinal force roared through him like a raging flood, wild and unstoppable. The tiny vortexes spun into a frenzy, sifting out the last remaining impurities. A long moment later, when the final wisp of energy had been fully refined, Kael's eyes opened again. The fourth realm of meridian opening. But there was no joy in those eyes. His meridians grew broader, his spiritual energy denser, yet every breakthrough now demanded over a dozen times the resources an ordinary cultivator required. This bottomless pit would only grow more monstrous. Just then, a faint rustle sounded beside him. Folly rubbed her eyes and drifted awake. In the flickering candlelight, her expression was still glazed with drowsiness. She murmured sweetly, "Young master." Relief loosened Kael's chest. He pushed the resource worries aside for now. "Folly, how are you feeling? I slept so well." A bit more liveliness returned to her eyes, but her voice stayed muffled. "But I had another dream." "What did you dream?" Folly stared straight at Kael, the rims of her eyes turning red. "I dreamed someone took me away again, but I couldn't bear to leave young master." Kael fell silent for a beat. Then his expression hardened into something unprecedentedly grave. "Folly, tell me the truth." He pinned her with his gaze. "When you looked at those people before, what did you feel inside?" "They were bad people." Folly clenched her fists, puffing with anger. "Just like Commander Gu, they all wanted to kill young master." I have no cultivation, so I couldn't help young master. All I could do was glare at them." She tilted her face up like a child waiting for praise. "Young master, I think it was still useful." Folly, Kael's voice cut through, suddenly harsh, laced with an oppressive force that brooked no argument. "Remember this. From now on, you are absolutely forbidden to do that again. But why? No reasons. Each word hammered down like a gavel. You only need to obey my words. Those people cannot hurt me, much less kill me. What you must do is stand aside and watch how I slaughter them in return. Do you understand?" He had never used this tone with her before. Folly froze. The watery light in her eyes quivered, but in the end, she nodded obediently. "I understand, young master." Only then did Kael let out a soft breath, his voice gentling. "You've already helped me greatly. Without you, I would never have refined that umbral ginseng so quickly, nor advanced my cultivation this fast." Folly's dull eyes instantly kindled. "Young master, then can I still help you find spirit herbs in the future? Naturally. Wonderful." "Shall we go now?" "We'll go now." Kael rose slowly and wrapped his fingers around the hilt of the riven blade. In the dimness, the cold light in his eyes was like a venom. Dipped blade, frozen, quiet, and lethal. "Along the way we'll also kill people. Kill people. My adoptive father taught me, those who kill shall be killed." His voice lay flat as a frozen leg. "Right now, throughout the wildwood, many people want my life. Rather than being chased by them, better to." He lifted his sword, settled Folly onto his back, and stepped out of the cave. Take their lives first. Deep in the wildwood, the desolate wilderness was so still that not even insects stirred. Over a dozen rogue cultivators had gathered, their cultivation ranging from the first to the sixth realm of meridian opening. The air simmered with agitation and suspicion. Some cursed their rotten luck. Others grumbled that the bounty was too hot to handle. Many argued and shoved the search duties onto each other. None noticed the silent silhouette that had materialized among the shadows of the forest. A voice came sliding low across the ground, cold as wind leaking through cracks in ice. "I hear you're looking for me." The group spun around in fright. From behind a withered thicket, a youth walked out with unhurried steps. A delicate little girl was perched on his back, and in his hand hung the chipped edge of a riven blade. His stride was calm, deliberate like footsteps, pressing directly onto their strained nerves. It was Kael and Folly. The surprise and suspicion in the cultivator's eyes lasted only a heartbeat before being devoured by scorching greed and savage delight. "It's him, the one from the bounty, no doubt 90% match." "That's him? Ha ha ha. We were just cursing our luck trying to find this whelp, and now he walks right into our hands." They closed in like a wolf pack, dry branches and dead leaves crunching to brittle shards beneath their feet. The chill in the wildwood deepened. Killing intent flooded the air. Folly pressed against Kael's back, her eyes red, rimmed, and shouted with bitter hatred. "Villains! Young master has never even met you. What gives you the right to kill him?" by the right that he murdered his own father.
The leading cultivator at the 6th realm of Meridian
Enning projected righteous fury, yet his gaze could not fully hide the greed burning within. Killing him rids the world of a blight. He licked his lips and added, low and sinister, cleanse the world of evil and earn spirit crystals. Why wouldn't we be happy to oblige?
Kael's fingers tightened on the hilt.
The glacial killing intent in his eyes sank deep, down into the darkest abyss, where it flared into a silent, edge-sharp gleam.
His face was a mask of stone.
He raised his longsword with slow deliberation, the blade catching the cold killing intent burning in his eyes.
Folly.
No need to waste words on them. Whether I killed my father or not no longer matters. What matters is this. My life is now worth 2,000 origin crystal. He paused, his voice dropping to a low iron rasp. Remember, reasoning with people who refuse to listen to reason is the stupidest thing under heaven. Folly wiped at her tears, her voice trembling. Young master, then what do we do? His answer came soft as a breath.
Kill. The moment the word left his lips, a foot-long arc of razor sword essence erupted from the blade, shrieking through the air like tearing silk.
Mid-flight, the Kai split in two, driving into the mob at a speed the eye could barely track. He had reached the 4th meridian of the arterial opening realm, long since condensed his second strand of prime arrival, Sword Kai.
Blood sprayed in crimson ribbons.
Screams could not even fully form.
Several bodies crumpled, their throats slashed open, only strangled gurgles hissing from severed windpipes.
Metallic, sweet blood drenched the dark earth in an instant, the stench so thick it turned the stomach. A desperate roar slashed through the wildwood.
Attack!
The high, stranking cultivator blanched, his voice cracking.
This brat's monstrous.
Everyone strike together. Whoever holds back gets not a single origin crystal, a sword flashed. The air screamed. His words died in his throat.
Share.
The last 2 syllables fell by lingering instinct alone. A coldness kissed his neck. His head tumbled to the ground. Dead eyes, still bulging with disbelief, stared at nothing. Only now did the survivors truly grasp the horror that was Kael. Pity, it was far too late. Sword Kai wove a web of slaughter.
It shredded the air.
Shrieks of agony and the crack of splintering bone erupted in layered cacophony. In mere heartbeats, this patch of wildland became a butcher's yard. The soil turned to a black, greasy mire of blood. The stench clogged the nose. An almost tangible miasma of death blanketed the wilderness. From beginning to end, it was a one-sided massacre. The prey had become the hunter. The hunters were stripped of even the right to scream. Folly lay pressed against Kael's back. Her body trembled faintly. Through the fabric of his robes, he could feel the desperate grip of her fingers digging into his shoulder.
His voice was low.
Afraid?
A little?
Her words were thin as a mosquito's whine.
It's nothing.
You'll get used to it. Since he had decided to teach Folly the path of cultivation, Kael had hardened his heart. The weak are meat, the strong eat, survival belongs to the fittest.
Those words were carved from bleached bones in the world of martial cultivation.
If he had possessed enough strength, would Thuron have been hunted down by his own clan? Would Kael himself bear the brand of a patricide, nailed to a pillar of shame and cast out of the city to die? All of it stemmed from one simple failure. He had not been strong enough. If strength was what he lacked, then strength was what he would gain. He swept the battlefield clean in short order, looted everything of worth. Without lingering a moment longer, he carried Folly away into the deep forest and vanished. In the blink of an eye, more than half a month slipped by. During those days, Kael often used himself as bait, luring waves of rogue cultivators into ambushes. The results spoke for themselves. In this wildwood, the mortal awakening realm was the ceiling. Condensing core cultivators were considered local lords even within the Grand Kai Empire. They would never stoop to risk their lives for a paltry 2,000 origin crystal. And so, with every successful slaughter, the rogues were bled white. Their courage shattered. No one dared utter the word bounty anymore. On a small hilltop, several rogue cultivators huddled together. Their faces were etched with fear. Did you hear? Yesterday another group got greedy. Wiped out. There was even a 9th meridian arterial opening expert among them. How could I not hear? How strong is this Kael, really? Even mortal awakening experts don't dare make a move now. Origin crystal's a fine prize, but you need a life attached to spend it. One man spat a curse. When the Goo family posted that bounty, they forgot to mention he was a goddamn death dealer.
They set us up.
As they muttered, a cultivator scrambled up the hillside on all fours. His face was a mask of sheer terror.
Run!
Get out of here.
I think.
I saw that butcher heading our way.
What?
That walking calamity.
Here. Run.
In the space of a breath, the group scattered like startled birds, bolting into the forest in a mad frenzy. Moments later, Kael's figure emerged upon the hilltop. Young master, it looks like they fled again.
Folly glanced around.
Every man fears death. Kael's expression dripped contempt. After yesterday's slaughter, he had not encountered another rogue cultivator. Even when spotted from afar, they fled as if seeing a ghost, putting as much distance as possible between them. Do we still go hunting for them?
No more.
Kael drew a deep breath. Hatred and resolve hardened into a chill gleam in his eyes. Time is running short. Now that men feared him like a tiger, further hunting was meaningless. Moreover, the Valor Hall qualification trial was fast approaching. He had to convert every scrap of looted resource into raw cultivation power, and then, young master, are we going to avenge Uncle Thuron? Folly's gaze dimmed. Though Thuron had not doted on her as on his own child, he had treated her with genuine kindness. The sorrow had long been buried in her heart.
Yes.
The murderous malice blazing in Kael's eyes seemed almost corporeal. A debt of blood is repaid in blood. The whispers of the wildwood quickly blew into the Goo family.
Father.
Within the main hall of the Goo family compound, candle flames danced, stretching Eldric's shadow into something long and cold. Cedric stood before him, anxiety creasing his face.
What do we do now?
Those rogues are utterly unreliable. Several families in the city are already laughing at us. There are rumors spreading, saying...
Saying what?
Eldric's face was a dark pond.
Saying...
That Thuron was actually killed by us. That Kael is nothing but a scapegoat.
Let them talk.
Eldric's smile was a blade of ice, and the temperature in the hall plummeted. The candle flames shrank back. It's just those other families stirring the fire. Once Oron emerges from seclusion and seizes the Valor Hall qualification, their mouths will snap shut on their own. When that time comes, what will the truth even matter? My Goo family will break free of Skyblade City entirely, and rise to heights they can only dream of. Father's wisdom is absolute.
But Kael.
Cedric hesitated.
He remains a hidden calamity. That whelp cannot be left alive.
Eldric narrowed his eyes. His gaze was a venom-dipped spike. I thought I had shown him enough caution, yet I still underestimated him. Take 2 men. Draw 5,000 origin crystal from the treasury. Set out for the wild wood yourself. Great rewards rouse great courage. Use the money to buy the loyalty of several mortal awakening rogues and orchestrate a full-scale hunt.
Kill him? This.
Since we misjudged him before, there can be no margin for error this time.
Go?
Yes. Kael, of course, had no idea what price Eldric had just put on his head. Deep inside a hidden cave, he sat cross-legged with eyes shut. His body was surrounded by a mound of origin crystal. Spiritual energy flooded into his meridians like a rising tide. The past weeks had been bountiful. Over 1,000 origin crystal, 4 common spirit herbs, a dozen Kai gathering pills, over 100 first-grade beast cores, and 20 plus second-grade beast cores. But the most precious treasures were the 2 rare spirit herbs Folly had found for him, a scarlet vermilion fruit and an unnamed spirit grass whose medicinal potency rivaled that of the umbral ginseng. Suddenly, his internal aura shuddered violently. A bottleneck shattered. His cultivation surged into the 6th meridian of the arterial opening realm without the slightest obstruction. When the remnants of his resources were nearly exhausted, he did not hesitate. He snatched up the vermilion fruit and the spirit grass, stuffed them into his mouth. A domineering torrent of spiritual power detonated within him. The flagging momentum of his breakthrough reignited, roaring with renewed power. It brutally forced open the remaining branch meridians. The final barrier crumbled with a thunderous crack. A turbulent shockwave of Kai erupted from him in all directions, rattling loose stones from the cave walls.
7th meridian.
The very realm he had held before his cultivation was crippled. Now he had clawed his way back to the peak, yet the power churning within him was several times denser and more terrifying than in those bygone years. Off to the side, Folly rested her chin in her hands. Her large eyes brimmed with attachment, not daring to make the slightest sound. It was then that muffled voices drifted in from outside the cave.
Is this the place?
There's a cave on that cliff face. HMPH, the Goo family's bounty money isn't free. Search carefully. Don't let him slip away.
A sharp hiss of air.
Kael's eyes flew open.
Crimson veins surged in his pupils.
He knew that voice.
All too well.
Cedric.
His foster father was dead.
His own foundation shattered, his body cast out from the family. The man responsible for everything was standing right outside this cave. Hatred, like boiling magma, burned a hole straight through his chest. The scene of that day rose before his eyes once more. A sneak attack in the dark.
Unconsciousness.
Waking to find his foster father rushing at him, maddened, with Kael's own sword buried in his heart. The moment he tried to draw close, the dying Thuron had struck him with a palm blast. Hurled him back, leaving only those final words ringing in his ears. Asterisk, do not rashly attempt to comprehend the golden sigil. Asterisk, then Eldrick had arrived with his men, and the crime of patricide was hammered onto his head.
Foster father.
Kael's eye sockets split. 2 streams of bloody tears carved paths down his face. 17 years of nurturing grace transmuted into a sky-reaching killing intent that incinerated the last shred of his reason.
Young master.
Folly's voice shook. Kael turned to her, his voice a rasp forced from his throat.
Stay here.
Wait for me to return.
Don't you dare die.
It's them who die. He slowly touched the dimensional pouch at his waist. The Firecloud spear was inside. A detonation of emotion. The spiritual power within him surged like a raging sea. The sword in his hand condensed its sword essence to the absolute limit, a deadly force held just below the surface. The blade keened a low, vibrating hum under the mad influx of power.
I'll make them all pay.
The words had barely left Kael's lips. Only a blurred afterimage remained in his place. His body exploded outward, feet cratering the rock wall at the cave mouth. Stone shards sprayed like cannonballs, tracing sharp parabolas down the sheer cliff. Outside, in the wildlands, Cedric approached with 5 men. A confident sneer twisted his lips. Among the 3 rogue cultivators, a young man frowned. His voice was low, but carried weight. When he's dead, the origin crystal and the spirit weapons you promised better not be short. Cedric's reply oozed arrogance.
Rest assured.
In Skyblade City, the reputation of the Goo family, Aurora, a beast's howl tore the heavens asunder. Cedric, the shout still echoed as a bleak sword essence ripped through the air. A shrieking wail chased its edge. In a split second, it was mere yards from Cedric's face. Cedric's pupils shrank to pinpricks. A faint red glow burst across his body as he twisted aside in a desperate lurch. The sword essence screamed past his robes, its scorching wake carving a bloody line across his cheek.
Doom. Crash.
Ancient trees behind him sheared in half at the trunk. Wood fibers detonated into splinters. Their massive canopies thundered to the ground, throwing up a storm of dust and muck. Face ashen, Cedric stared at the figure striding through the settling dust.
Strong.
Overwhelmingly strong. Kael was shrouded in a seething mantle of murderous aura. Like a demon crawling out of hell, leagues beyond the strength he had before his crippling. Cold sweat beaded the backs of all 3 rogue cultivators. Kael leveled his longsword. Gang pulsed erratically at the tip, tearing at the surrounding air.
Cedric.
Today, I'll have your life in recompense for my foster father. The young rogue cultivator looked stunned. Didn't you say he killed his own father? Why is he demanding your life in return? Shut your mouth. Cedric's expression was venomous. You want the origin crystal. Then stop asking questions. The young man fell silent. What did the truth matter, weighed against spirit crystal? Cedric fixed his gaze on Kael, his tone laced with poison. Little bastard. You have the item, don't you? Hand it over. If my mood improves, I might even leave your corpse intact. Kael's reply was a low growl dripping venom. Go fuck yourself. What did you say? Kael lifted his head slowly. Hatred burned in his eyes, something almost physical. I said go fuck yourself. Fine.
Fine.
Fine. Cedric trembled with fury, his voice a jagged screech. You wretched animal. The day Thuron picked you up off the street, I knew you were a festering calamity, a traitor at the very bone. One knot of our blood can never share our heart. You are and always have been a wild bastard.
Oron is the true bloodline of the Goo family, the future of the Goo family. And you stole what should have been his. He grew more hysterical with every word, spittle flying.
And Thuron was no better.
A scion of the Goo family, yet he always favored you, a mongrel.
It's laughable even on the edge of death. He tried to use that item to bargain with my father, demanding safe passage for you out of Skyblade City.
Heh, what touching father-son devotion.
Truly sickening, foster father. 2 trails of bloody tears slid down Kael's face. He crushed the last shard of his sanity into dust.
I'll make them all die. The word die still hung in the air when Kael's form vanished.
The sword essence upon his blade erupted 3 feet into the air.
The tip screamed as it ripped through the wind, aimed directly at Cedric's throat.
Engage him? Cedric sneered, stepping back. My Goo family's origin crystal isn't so easy to earn. A blur of movement, the young mortal awakening rogue shot forward, even faster than Kael.
A movement technique trailed after images behind him as he instantly interposed himself in Kael's path.
Simultaneously, left and right, the other 2 rogues' ferocious attacks arrived. The howl of their martial wind sealed off every avenue of retreat.
The young man smirked inwardly.
Against a 3-pronged pincer strike, Kael would have no choice but to retreat. Then he could use his superior speed to dance around and bleed the boy dry.
But he was wrong.
Kael, a furnace of incandescent rage, wanted nothing but to tear Cedric apart.
He did not dodge.
He did not block.
2 heavy strikes landed solidly against his body.
The flesh of his shoulders exploded on impact. Blood mist blossomed like winter plums. His bones issued a sickening, teeth-grinding crunch.
A mouthful of scalding blood sprayed from Kael's lips, turning to a scarlet haze. Yet his momentum did not falter for an instant. The kinetic force of the 2 blows became his own propulsion.
His speed accelerated through the blood haze. He became a hunting meteor, smashing through the air straight forward. The young man's pupils reflected a cold sword, light expanding at impossible speed. The confident smirk on his face didn't even have time to morph into terror. A sound so fine, so faint, a thwick that made the scalp crawl.
The bleak sword essence drilled into the young man's brow.
The blade tip pierced the skull. The shriek of violently compressed air mixed with the sizzle of flash, cauterized flesh. Sword Kai punched through the back of his head, trailing a gout of superheated blood mist that instantly froze into a fine, dark-red crystalline spray in the cold wind. The young man's body locked in place, the light draining from his eyes. Kael flicked his sword, blood sluicing off the spine, and turned. Blood-soaked eyes pinned Cedric, whose face had gone bone white. The brittle crack of a broken saber still sang in the air.
The severed half, blade spun into a bed of rotting leaves with a thick thud. Before Cedric could even process the horror, Kael's sword, chipped and notched from the slaughter, was already coiling toward him like a leech to bare skin. The blade slashed a diagonal arc. A right arm, severed clean at the elbow, tumbled away, its fingers still twitching.
Blood jetted from the stump like a hot spring, hissing as it painted the dead, yellow leaves into a vast swath of scarlet mud. Pinned by agony, Cedric's howl ripped through the dead silence of the wilds. Yet in that same instant, a bone, deep chill shot up his spine and squeezed his heart in a death grip, the sensation of the Reaper's touch, cold, viscous, and inches away. At that precise moment, another scream erupted behind Cedric. One of the last 2 rogues, a sword punched clean through his chest, crumpled lifelessly to the ground, splashing bloody mud across Cedric's face. Cedric, Kael shook the gore from his blade, his crimson eyes boring through the carnage to nail him where he stood. Die, the blood-drenched figure shattered the landscape underfoot, charging at him like a harbinger of doom. With each step, the earth sprayed, dead leaves swirled, and the very ground seemed to tremble. Cedric's heart and goal shattered in his chest.
Run!
Every thought of resistance evaporated. He whirled, pushing his cultivation to its absolute limit, and became a fading blur, streaking madly into the forest depths. Behind him, the sounds of furious bellows and dying screams grew fainter and fainter, until they were lost to the wind. He ran for what felt like an eternity before staggering to a halt, bent double, gasping for breath. His chest heaved like a blacksmith's bellows. Cold sweat mixed with blood dripped into his eyes, a sharp, stinging pain.
Little beast, he ground his teeth, his voice trembling with terror and venom.
Wait. I swear I'll, Cedric, 2 words. 2 light, floating words, yet they rang like a soul. Reaping sutra from the depths of the 9 nether hells, spoken not 3 feet behind him. Every hair on Cedric's body stood on end. His brain detonated with a boom.
He lacked even the courage to look back. He only wanted to ignite his movement technique once more. Too late.
Sword light spilled like the cold moon, flickering across the backs of his knees.
Cedric felt his legs simply vanish beneath him.
He pitched forward with no support, face planting into the stinking, damp rot.
His mouth filled with decayed leaves and squirming insects.
With the last of his strength, he shakily turned himself over and looked up. Kael stood there, looking down from on high.
His entire body was a canvas of grime and gore.
Blood soaked every thread of his clothes, dripping from the hem in a steady rhythm. Some of it his own, most of it other men's. The eyes that stared down at him were steeped in crimson. Kael, Cedric's Adam's apple bobbed, his lips quivering. He wanted to beg, to invoke the Goo family, to trade anything and everything he could think of for his miserable life. But he only managed 2 syllables. The sword light flickered again.
A cold kiss on the neck.
The world spun end over end. The last thing his sight captured was his own headless corpse and Kael's indifferent back as he sheathed his sword. Foster father, Kael's voice was low, as if speaking to himself. That's the first. A pause. A breath of wind through the trees, the scent of blood and pine. Far below, in the dark and damp of the cave, only a few fractured rays of daylight leaked through the entrance. Folly was curled up in the deepest corner.
Her arms wrapped tightly around her knees.
Her small face was buried between them. Her shoulders trembled with every faint sound of slaughter that drifted down from the mountain forest. Young master, please don't die, she murmured, lifting her head. Tears were welling in her eyes, but she stubbornly refused to let them fall. If you die, I won't listen to you anymore. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the cave entrance. Folly flinched and snapped her face up. Backlit by the fading light stood a figure wreathed at the edges in a dark red halo. He was drenched head to toe in blood, like a malevolent ghost crawling straight out of a battlefield of the damned. Young master, she didn't flinch away. She bolted up like a frightened fawn, throwing herself against that blood-soaked chest. Her small arms wrapped tight around his waist, clutching fistfuls of his robe as if she would never let go again. Through ragged, breathless gasps, her words came out in broken sobs, tears and snot smearing across him. Why wouldn't you let me help? I know I could have helped you. Kael's voice was thick with exhaustion as his hand, caked in dried blood, patted the back of her head gently. Don't cry. These are small wounds. I'm not dying, he paused, staring out at the darkening sky beyond the cave. Time's about right. Let's go. Folly looked up, her face a painted mess, and hiccuped through her tears. Go? Where Kael took her small, ice gold hand, the heat from his own fingers searing by contrast. To settle the debt, at the fringes of the wildwood, clusters of rogue cultivators had gathered. Some leaned against tree trunks, others squatted on boulders, lazily discussing the massive gamble they'd just witnessed. One rogue lounged against a gnarled oak, a sneer in his tone. 6 mortal awakening experts, TCH. The Goo family's really panicking, another chimed in, shaking his head. No doubt. 5,000 origin crystal. That's a fortune we trade our lives for all year long. A third rogue chuckled darkly, idly picking at his sleeve. Pity we don't have the luck for it. If you ask me, that Kael's chances are slim to none. He's dead, the words choked off. The speaker froze, sensing the atmosphere around him shift like a sudden frost. His companion wore an expression like he'd seen a ghost, mouth hanging open without a sound, merely pointing a single trembling finger toward the deep forest. He turned his head and followed that finger. His own expression froze solid. On a grassy slope in the distance, 2 figures, one large, one small, walked slowly toward the perimeter. The larger one was drenched in blood from head to toe, his murderous aura piercing the sky, every step carrying the oppressive weight of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. The smaller one was clutched tightly by a gore-streaked hand, following right at his side, coated in blood, holding a little girl's hand. Across the entire wildwood, only one person fit that description. Kael! He was alive. It was as if an invisible hand had seized the entire crowd by the throat. All chatter choked off into a dead, heavy silence. Kael did not look at anyone. Holding Folly's hand, he walked through the crowd with a steady, unhurried pace, heading for the outskirts of the wildwood. Only after those two figures had vanished entirely into the distance did the frozen crowd erupt back to life. One rogue swallowed hard, his voice dry and scratchy. He isn't dead. Another snapped back, his nerves frayed. Blind, are you? Obviously not. A third's eyes went wide, a terrible realization dawning. Then, if he's alive, the men sent to kill him, at that, every heart in the gathering seized in unison. 6 mortal awakening experts.
Yawn.
Killed by a single man. A rogue with sharp eyes and a sharper instinct called out. Where is he heading? Another answered, squinting at the distant tree line. By that direction, Skyblade City. A murmur rippled through them. What's he going to Skyblade City for? The first rogue spat, a fierce gleam igniting in his gaze. Isn't it obvious? Someone almost had him killed. Can you swallow that rage and not go take revenge? A decisive voice cut through the murmurs. Let's move. We follow and watch the show. Another added a warning, half fear, half awe. Watching's fine, but don't get too close. The reply came as a breathless laugh. Of course not. That's a living, breathing calamity. Who dare get close? The crowd seethed with excitement, calling out to friends, and soon in 2s and 3s, they strung out behind, tailing that murderous silhouette from a safe distance. Skyblade City seethed with tension. News of the 7th Prince's arrival had long since torn through every household. Auron's eyes blazed with fierce light as he spoke to his father. Trust me. This time, I'll make everyone see who Skyblade City's true genius really is. Eldrick gave a heavy nod, a dark flame smoldering deep in his eyes. You are my Goo family's strongest card. Whether we soar or faltered, they decides it all. The main street lay deserted, the autumn air sharp with a killing chill. In a small shop by the city gate, a young clerk pressed against the doorframe, straining to see, muttering under his breath. The Valor Hall qualifiers once every 5 years, and we're stuck here missing it. The shopkeeper didn't bother raising his head. Auron's already broken through to the 6th meridian. Who else could even contend for that spot? Before I might have underestimated, the clerk's pupils suddenly shrank. Kael, a blood-soaked figure, emerged at the far end of the long street. Kael strode forward in crimson, stained robes, his steps heavy and resolute, as if he had just waded through a mountain of corpses. Where he passed, the very air seemed sucked dry. The soldiers guarding the gate recoiled 2 steps, clutching their halberds, throats bobbing. Kael gently lowered Folly from his back, mirroring the way she had carried him a month ago. Folly clutched Kael's sleeve, her voice cracking. Young master, those prizes should have been yours. They stole them, and then they tried to destroy you. Kael took Folly's hand, his voice calm as the ice of deep winter. First, we pay our respects to my sworn father. A throng of rogue cultivators surged through the city gate, instantly shattering the desolate quiet of the street. The shopkeeper grabbed one of them by the arm. Brother, what's happening? The man spat, frantic with excitement. Watching the show. Kael, out in the savage wilds, 6 spirit-channeling experts surrounded him, trying to kill him. You know what happened. He slaughtered every last one. The shopkeeper shuddered, threw down his abacus, and charged into the crowd. A tale of vengeance like this, a man might not see it twice in a lifetime. The main gate of the Goo family manor loomed grandly, vermilion doors stately and imposing. A handful of guards idled outside. Then a thunderous explosion tore the massive doors into thousands of splinters, shooting out in all directions. Wooden shards screamed through the air like shrieking blades. Through the billowing dust and smoke, Kael stepped inside, his bloody robes snapping. Cries erupted from the guards. Insolence, seize him, they swarmed. Kael never broke stride. The long, dormant spiritual force within him erupted violently, a surging wave of power, blasting outward with a single word, out. The guards were struck, as if by a titan's hammer. Chests caving, blood geysering from their mouths, sent flying backward, crashing into pillars, smoke and debris swirling. Kael walked straight for the ancestral hall in the rear courtyard. A white-haired clan elder blocked the path, his voice a venomous hiss. This is the Goo family ancestral hall, you bastard spawn. Kael hadn't drawn his sword, but the force had already arrived. The old man's words died in his throat, and his whole body was hurled sideways, smashing onto the cyan bricks and skidding several yards, dead or unconscious, no one could tell. 3 feet of blue steel plunged into the stone floor with a resonant clang. The sword hummed, its vibration a low, mournful cry. Kael entered the ancestral hall alone. Folly stood guard beside the embedded sword, eyes red, rimmed. The clan's curses rose like a foul tide, every word a blade aimed at Thuron.
Folly screamed back, voice ragged and fierce.
It's the Goo family that wronged young master. You're the ones lying inside the hall. The light was murky as sunken water. In the corner of the offering table, a spirit tablet lay discarded in the dust, tangled in cobwebs. A clear footprint had been stomped onto it, shattering one corner of the name Thuron. Kael trembled violently, veins surging red in his eyes.
He crashed to his knees.
The cyan bricks split soundlessly, thin fissures webbing outward. He slammed his forehead to the cold floor, a low growl tearing from his throat. Sworn father, he lifted the spirit tablet with infinite care, brushing away the dust, his thumb tracing the deep depression of the footprint.
Anguish gripped his heart like a vise.
His voice dropped to a guttural whisper.
Sworn father, the Goo family has rotted to the core. Kael's eyes slowly closed.
Then it no longer deserves to exist. Within his mindscape, a chill spread like a rising tide. Shade materialized, then paused, visibly startled by Kael's appearance.
A click of the tongue echoed in the void.
Such overwhelming, murderous intent. Boy, you're practically born for the demonic path.
Well,
care to become this sovereign's disciple? Kael met Shade's gaze directly.
I want revenge.
Help me, Shade's retort was quick and sharp.
On what grounds?
Your favor, the words cut off abruptly.
Over a dozen sword intents materialized around Shade, their edges piercingly cold, interweaving a cage of deadly frost.
Shade's face twitched, and in an instant his expression shifted to something almost amiable.
This sovereign may walk the demonic path, but I've always had a warm heart.
Tell me, how can I help? Kael spoke in a low voice, laying bare the dark secret, how Thuron had been betrayed by his own clan, his body destroyed, and his Tao extinguished.
Shade fell silent for a long moment, the chill in the space condensing into tangible frost.
Finally, a sorrowful sigh drifted through the void.
The taste of a knife in the back, wielded by the one you trusted most, I know it well. So be it.
Today, this sovereign will aid you this once. The martial arena, 10 yards across, built of piled cyan stone. Crowds packed every side, a surging sea of noise. At the center sat the city lord, Lorien, robed in brocade, majestic and imposing, his gaze like lightning. The heads of the other families were arrayed on either side, their expressions unreadable. Only Eldrick wore a dark, venomous smile, his eyes gleaming with hidden intent, like a coiled viper. The other patriarchs frowned or cast their gazes downward, silent currents churning in their exchanged looks. They understood exactly what was at stake.